the goal is to connect to human beings. And if you want to connect to human beings, they need to feel like they know you. And so you can't keep everything about you at arm's length. So especially like for the online coach that doesn't want to make any reels with themselves talking and they don't want to show up on stories, ask yourself why, because you're not letting yourself show up big enough that you're going to be seen as a leader in your industry and in your subject matter. And so you're holding your audience at arm's length. If they don't get that chance to feel like they know you, the human, that's our best selling tool.
Hey, Emily, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you on.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I know that listeners just heard a little bit of your bio that I read out loud on the last clip, but can you tell those folks listening a little bit about you and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Emily. If we haven't met before, hello, hello, hello. I help coaches scale their influence and their income online. So I focus in on brand clarity, offer creation, sales and marketing strategy. And my whole MO, the whole reason, and we talked about this a little bit right before we hopped on, the whole reason I got into this is because I saw that most online coaches, they're failing to make money, not because of their offers, not because of what they have to give to the world, but it's because they fail to talk about it in a really clear and concise way, and people just don't get it. So I help coaches share the value of what they have to do in a really clear and concise way online to drive sales.
I love that. So how were you inspired to go down that route and pursue that as your main goal or objective in your business?
Yeah, it's like a long villain origin story, I would say. But if we back it way up, my whole kind of story and beginning with coaches and learning how to talk about themselves online started when I was a personal trainer. I had been introduced to the online space and that people were making tons of money as personal trainers online. And I was like, this is so cool. I want to know more about this. I want to get into this. I also have a background in marketing, a degree in marketing. And previous to being a personal trainer, I had worked with entrepreneurs on their marketing. And so when I heard about this online space, I was just obsessed, but I wasn't good at it. Like when I started to try to bring my personal training business online, I really struggled. And I was like, okay, there's something here. So then throughout that time, I ended up leaving the personal training space. I went and I started working for a multi-million-dollar entrepreneurial coaching brand. And I got to kind of put my marketing skills to use, work on their brand and help them with their clarity and their marketing, hone my skills. And then I just got to observe. And I got to work with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs through that business, watch them try to grow their brands online. And I just saw over and over again that people were really struggling with clarity. And it was this place where I felt like I had now gotten to the other side of it. And I was like, I see the gap. I see the gap in the industry and in what everybody is trying to do, where it's like they have these amazing businesses, but they just can't communicate them. And it was at that point where I was like, all right, Emily, I think this is your calling. This is your time to step out, leave the company that you're at right now, and go help coaches clarify their message so that they can spread it with the world.
I love that. And that's actually how we met too, as you were
Yes.
supporting the mastermind that we were in and doing an excellent job of it, by the way. But I love that you broke out and you took what you learned by sitting on the sidelines and said, wait a minute, I could actually coach on this and absorbing that, which is so awesome. So on that note, I know that you also grew really quickly. I remember we were watching you, you supported us. And then when you left and you pursued your own thing, you grew rapidly online. Can you point to any, I know there are so many factors, but can you point to something that you think made a huge difference in your ability to grow that quickly?
Yes. This is a good conversation. One, like right off the bat, I will put this out there that I jumped in and was like all in at the time when Reels were still really taking off. And I was like, I'm going to go all in on Reels. And so that definitely helped. But at the same time, there were a lot of people also going all in on Reels at the same time who weren't growing at the same rate. And so I would say what I think happened differently with mine was this emphasis on clearly communicating to people what the value was that I was offering them. We all know the advice, you need to pick a niche and stick to it, but I really embodied that. And I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Every single reel, every single piece of content I put out is going to be on this same theme. And so there's no question when you see my face pop up of what is she talking about? What does she have to offer me? The message was very consistent. And so people got used to seeing me because I was showing up over and over again, but they also got used to hearing my message. And so it became like, if you needed what I had, I was the go-to person for it. And that is definitely what helped skyrocket that growth.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of like seeing the same person or seeing somebody in the same color outfit all the time. You just start associating with that color or with that outfit, right? So if you kept seeing the same image of a person and they always dress the same, um, just for example, Steve Jobs, he always wears black, right? Or always wore
Mm-hmm.
black, and Elizabeth Holmes, same thing. And I started associating those things together. And I think what you say and your presence, not just your appearance, has that same effect on people, right? Like you start seeing Emily and you go, oh, she's going to talk about coaching. Like, I know she's going to talk about whatever it is that you're going to talk about that day. You know exactly what message is coming through. And I believe that's totally true. Like we just want that comfort and consistency, right? You want to see
Absolutely.
consistency.
And it's easy on the brain. It's like, oh, I know what this person is. I know what they are
Yeah.
on my news feed. And it's like a comfort level too of seeing them.
Yeah, totally. And on that note, I know that you grew really quickly and had a lot of success there. I actually want to flip it back to say, what is a mistake or maybe a couple that you made while you were growing that now you're probably grateful for, but that you probably wish you could have shortcut along the way?
Yes. There are so many. There are so many mistakes. I would love to share a couple of them. So first off, I don't like regret any of the mistakes I've made because they are what help us learn. And all of my growth, both in terms of followers and in terms of my business and my income, really have been on the back end of being willing to make those mistakes and just charge fearlessly forward. So I just kind of want to set the tone with that. But if we talk about the growth, for those of you who aren't familiar with me, and this is the first time that we are getting to know each other, I actually have a new brand now. So when we're talking about the rapid growth, it was on a previous account that I had. The handle on the old account was called The Launch Babe. Now I operate under my own name, but I didn't just change the handle. I actually changed accounts. And part of that is what leads into the mistake I want to talk about here is I didn't show up authentically as I don't want to say inauthentically, but I wasn't fully myself on the old account. And I think that's really what the mistake comes down to is I felt more like I had to show up as a particular version of myself instead of the full human for people to get on board. And some of that comes in if we want to go down this route of even talking about it, imposter syndrome when it comes to building a new account and putting yourself out there online. But basically, I only shared a fraction of who I was, and I didn't talk about a lot of the things that I really wanted to talk about. And I ended up attracting an audience that was so game for that version of myself that I had put out, but I felt limited. I felt like I now couldn't integrate these other things that I wanted to talk about after I had grown so fast because it had grown from 0 to 30,000 followers on that old account in like between 6 to 8 months. So it was very rapid growth, but everyone was here for just this one particular version of me. And as cheesy as it sounds to just be like, I wanted to be myself, every time I would bring in more of the content and more of the things that I actually wanted to talk about in my business, which I figured out as I was growing, right? Stumbling
Right.
through it, figuring it out, being like, oh, I actually want this to be my message. Every time I would put something out, then engagement would rapidly drop. And then I would go through this mental spiral because people weren't there for that. They were there for this one very curated version of me that
Right.
really wasn't the full me and my full message. And I started to feel this disconnect to my followers. Some people were there and they were great and they were there for the full me, but a lot of them were just there for the very specific version of me that I was sharing because I had intentionally made a choice of like, well, you can't share the full you, Emily, because you're not worthy of showing up in that way online yet. And so that's a big reason why I ended up switching accounts was to attract a more aligned audience that didn't just want the curated version, they wanted the whole picture.
Yeah. Were you basically telling yourself then, I have to earn the right to be able to do that in a sense?
100%. Yep. I didn't think
Interesting.
that I was ready to be it sounds so weird and it sounds so like flowery, but I didn't feel like I was ready to be a full human expression online. I was like, people want you looking super professional, looking like you have all the answers, looking like you have it all put together. When that was a lie, that's not true. And so I really cut it off because I didn't think, exactly like you said, I didn't think I was worthy or ready yet to be authentic online.
Cool. And what kind of woke you up to the fact that, that makes a difference, right? Because you made that decision to say, you're saying now that was a quote unquote mistake, right? Of course we don't regret them, but what shifted in the new account that made you realize, oh, this does work. Like I am worthy. I can do this. Was there kind of a shifting moment there?
Yes. And I would say it was actually right before I decided to make the shift, before I decided to move over to a new account. I was having this like reflection moment where I was looking back and I was like, well, this is what you want to talk about now, Emily. This is what people are here for. You have this big following now. Does it make sense to walk away from it? Or should you just pivot and let people leave who don't want to be here for this new, even more clear iteration of your brand? And what I realized as I was going through my books and going through my numbers, I was like, Emily, your highest cash month was in the beginning when you were just kind of being the most you before it became this curated version of you. Because at first I was like, well, it's just me, right? Like, I don't know what I'm making yet. So this is just the purest expression of my content that I can come up with because I'm just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. That quickly became, oh, shoot, we're growing really fast. Make sure you stick to this tiny version of the message that you see that's working so that people keep coming in.
Right.
But if I go back to that beginning where I was just trying everything and throwing things out there, that's when people felt the most connected to me and vice versa. And that was my highest cash month by a long shot. And so I was like, okay, you have all these new followers, but they don't really resonate with you if your sales aren't increasing at the rate that your followers are coming in. So it's silly almost to be so attached to this number when back when you had the smaller following right back in the beginning and you felt really connected to your audience, that's when things were going the best in your business. And so at that point, it was kind of a no-brainer of like, okay, let's start over and let's focus on the quality of the community instead of just the numbers of people coming in and kind of only working the algorithm instead of focusing on the people that you're serving.
Yeah, I can 100% relate to that because we all have this compelling, especially when we're early in any business, even if we've been a business owner and you're starting something new, there's always this compelling sense of, I want to make as many people happy with me as possible.
Yes.
Until I figure out who I want to make happy. Because until you know exactly who you're talking to, and it's not that easy. We talk about it all the time in mastermind groups and coaching communities. Like you got to figure out who you're speaking to. Well, part of figuring out who you're speaking to is speaking to everyone, working with everyone you can, and realizing who you don't want to work with. And then actually getting super clear about that. But you have to work with and get exposure to certain audiences in order to figure out what you do and don't like. It's kind of like dating. You don't know what you want until you kind of try it and you realize, ooh, now I've learned that lesson and I'm going to go this way now. But it comes with experience and time. And I think the faster you can implement, reflect, and be aware of those things, the faster you're going to get that clarity into your audience. Would you agree?
Yes. And I'm so glad you said that because in the bigger picture, that is really what happened to me. I was building a brand that was clear and I was talking about marketing and I was just sharing general marketing strategies. But I realized as people kept coming in, I was like, oh, I'm most equipped and I'm most excited to help online coaches. Their strategy is a little bit different than, say, like the online product-based business owner, right? The strategies are different. And I was like, these are two different conversations too. But now I've invited all these product people in. Well, something's got to change. And so it was through talking to the masses, I realized, oh, I don't want to talk to the masses. There is a very specific group in here that I want to speak to. And that's right when I made the pivot.
So so since you brought up coaches, right, that you serve mostly online coaches, what is one, and I'll give you the freedom to say here, because I'll basically phrase it this way. What's one thing that no one listens to that they should? Like one thing that you wish you could embed in everyone's brains that maybe is not the easiest thing to implement, or is the one thing you keep saying, but yet not seeing it being implemented or changed? What's the one thing that comes to mind when I say that?
Oof, 8 things come to mind.
I'd say pick one or two. Pick one or two.
Yeah. If I were to condense it down, I would say it's show up big and show up unapologetic. I think so many people, they get that they have to make content every single day and they get that they need to be a well-established brand. And so they almost just go through the motions, but they forget that like the goal is to connect to human beings. And if you want to connect to human beings, they need to feel like they know you. And so you can't keep everything about you at arm's length. And yes, we pick and choose what we share online and our whole life doesn't have to be online, but people need to hear your voice. So especially like for the online coach that doesn't want to make any reels with themselves talking and they don't want to show up on stories, ask yourself why, because you're not letting yourself show up big enough that you're going to be seen as a leader in your industry and in your subject matter. And so you're holding your audience at arm's length if they don't get that chance to feel like they know you, the human. And that's our best selling tool, is when we can connect with people on that human to human level, but they've got to be able to hear your voice and they have to feel your presence big in whatever way you choose to share your presence. So again, I'm not saying share everything about your life online, but the things that you do choose to share them unapologetically, because people need to see you show up big.
Yeah. And I think I'll add on to that with, let's say someone is a bit more camera shy. They don't want to dance on reels or do the trends or anything like that. There are ways to do it without necessarily showing your face constantly or having to rethink and, re-record. This podcast is a great example. I love coming through on audio and I love being able to record content this way. And it's been well received. So it's kind of like leaning into where you show up best, where you're lit up the most, and where your audience can meet you where you're at too, is the most ideal situation, because you don't have to make yourself, you want to get out of your comfort zone when it comes to serving your clients, but you don't have to push yourself so far that you come to resent the process.
Yes. And like, you showing up big is going to look different than me showing up big. It's
right.
Like finding the parts of ourselves that are relevant and important for our audience to hear and see and understand, and letting that really be emphasized through our content.
Yeah. I want to bring up a topic, which I think would be really interesting to hear from you about, which is the compromise. I call it compromise for cash. So when starting out on a business, it's really easy to fall victim to temptation of, let's say, a big ticket client coming in, but you kind of know that this isn't exactly what I offer. I'm going to have to highly customize what I'm doing. It's not the ideal client, or it's not the ideal offer. It's people coming in saying, hey, can I hire you for, let's say you don't offer one-on-one. And you say, can I hire you for one-on-one, but you have zero one-on-one offers available, nothing crafted, and really no burning desire to go do it, but they offer you money, right? And you're like, ooh, how do you help coaches navigate as a new business owner? And I guess alongside of that, how you navigated it, the temptation of, well, I guess this one time I could make an exception for this reason, when it's really financial. Let's talk about kind of that, I call it compromise for cash.
Yeah, this is really juicy. So the first thing that comes to mind is boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. They will change your life. They will change your business. If you know something feels out of alignment, it's your responsibility to you and to the client to say no. Because if you say yes to money that doesn't feel good for any reason other than it's cash coming in, you're not going to have a stellar customer experience, right? You're going to bring that energy of, I don't really want to do this, to everything you have with them. And more importantly, you are closing off that time in your schedule for opportunities that you do want to pursue. So while that quick cash injection can be really tempting, we have to zoom out for a second and say, okay, am I playing the short game or am I playing the long game? Because if it's the short game, then yes, I should take this. But if I'm in this for longevity and to really grow a scalable business here, I can't be saying yes to things that don't feel good, because like I just said, you're closing off that time on your schedule for something you actually do want to build and grow and nurture. The other thing that comes to mind, though, is when you are in the beginning, like the very, very beginning, sometimes we need to do things for short-term infusions of cash, but like your gut will tell you so clearly if it's a good idea or a bad idea. And sometimes there is just that little bit of getting over a hump, but I think that there is a difference between saying yes to something because you're just tempted by the additional cash, and saying yes to something because it's going to set you up to be able to create the business that you want moving forward, right? Because sometimes we need cash flow, but it's emotional intelligence around why you're saying yes to that cash flow.
Yeah, that actually comes up in my CFO calls a lot of the times with clients, is we need to increase the cash flow, but don't compromise, right? What's so important is understanding resistance and knowing to acknowledge and name it. I say, if you're feeling resistance, which is any level of discomfort with a yes, you have to name, why am I feeling any sort of resistance here? Why is there a grip on the tires on this one? Why am I feeling this way? And if sometimes it's discomfort because it's above the level of service that you're used to providing, and it's going to challenge you and stretch you, which is, I think, a very healthy challenge. But it's also sometimes but is this dragging me backward? Is this pulling me forward or dragging me backward? Is that why I feel tread on the tires? And it's sometimes hard to discern those things where you feel like, well, this is something new, but is something new bad? And it's a really hard thing to grapple with, I think, especially when you're in your first couple of years of business.
Yeah, I love the way you phrase that though, because that's so true. Sometimes the resistance does come because we're scared and because we don't think we're ready for that level of opportunity. I think a lot of this really does come down to, like I just started to mention, is the emotional intelligence around it. And like you said, kind of feel into the feelings. Why is it here? What's actually coming up? What's the actual feeling behind the resistance? Because that's going to guide you to your answer of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. And I think there's also a lack of emphasis right now, especially with coaching. I think that everyone's kind of chasing that cash flow, especially in the seasonality of, maybe people aren't investing in during a lower economic time frame, or people are just kind of feeling a little more down and out on their cash flow projections. And they're thinking, well, I need to boost cash flow. I need to get a cash injection. Where do I get that? And they're looking for the quote unquote quick hit, right? They're looking for something that they can use to inject the cash as that's their objective. But long term, again, short game, long term, is that what's going to serve your business? And I can't tell you how many times I have taken the quick hit and said yes to something I probably shouldn't have. But also, you don't really learn at something you shouldn't have done until you learn. I think
gonna say that.
Yeah, you don't learn until you learn. And I'll admit, I look back and go, I kind of knew, but I ignored it because I was more compelled by the goal of cash flow. And if that's the goal, I just think it's like going to the grocery store when you're hungry, right?
Yep.
When you're hungry, you'll go after anything. And I think the whole key here is to not go hungry, to try to be as mindful as possible when you're looking at clients and really looking at them as applying to work with you truly.
Definitely. I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah. So on that note, let's talk about that seasonality, that kind of slowing in the coaching industry. We're kind of seeing a little bit of an industry trend right now where we're in the summer of 2022, and really summer is a slow time for coaching in general, I feel, but we're entering into a very uncertain economic environment. We're entering into a lot of uncertainty and a lot of doubt and fear. I think we've all seen this before. Us millennials have seen this several times. What is your advice to coaches, especially now in the wake of COVID? So many people went online. So many people started their own coaching businesses. I mean, the mastermind we were in, Emily, it's sold out time and time and time again, building coaching businesses. And now there's what some would call a saturated market online. Now, how do coaches who are getting into this field stand out and thrive even in turbulent economic times when people are less likely to invest? What can they do to differentiate?
Yeah, what a good question and such an interesting conversation. And, with all the talk about the recession, this has crossed my mind a few times. And what I keep coming back to is the idea that people will always spend money on things that they see value in. Period. Like money always finds a way to show up when we truly value the thing that we want to put that money towards. And so I believe that our job as coaches is to really get clear on what the value is that we provide, and then just stand behind it and continue to hold the vision, I suppose, and hold what's possible and be very clear on what we're selling. We don't want to get graspy and we don't want to oversell anything in any way that's out of integrity, but just be very clear on what your services are and why they're going to matter to the end consumer, so that they see your confidence in it, because nobody's going to buy if you start to feel unconfident in what you have to offer. So they need to feel that confidence first, and then they need to understand what it's going to do for them so clearly. And when we can hold those things and people can feel that confidence and that clarity in our message and in what we have to offer, if it's a good fit and they see the value, they're still going to invest. So I believe we have an opportunity to just kind of hold strong in what we do here, and customers will still find us.
And what is your thought on, I've heard mixed advice from various business coaches about, handling objections in sales. Because like you said,
Mhm.
if someone sees the value, they'll invest. How much, I'm trying to find a way to phrase this, but how much do you emphasize, handling objections and converting a no to a yes versus they're not ready and that's okay type of approach? You know what I'm talking about? When you're in like a sales
Yes.
call or when they're going through a decision, a lot of folks, I guess I'll call it old school, even though it was like 3 years ago. A lot of coaches 3 years ago were saying, you know, here's how to handle objections. Here's how to call them out on them, their fears and their stuff and whatever, and tell them it's worth it and sell them on it and sell them on it. And I've actually heard people backing off of that lately. And I'm curious kind of where you sit on that and what you typically advise folks.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and that is, the culture that I was initially taught how to do online coaching into is you handle the objections. I do not do any handling of objections in my sales because I think, well, I believe and I know if somebody is coming to me and they have all this uncertainty around whether or not it's going to work for them and they're coming up with excuses of, well, I don't have the money, I can't find the money. It's not my job to push because that means that they don't see the value in my services. So that means I did not do a good job either clearly explaining what it is or holding confident in my offer and the value that it's going to provide to them. So somewhere there's a disconnect where they didn't get it, didn't understand it, or they truly just don't feel like it's a good fit for them. And I personally feel it's a little pushy, a little uncomfortable, a little out of integrity to be like, well, okay, that's a lie that you're telling yourself. You should come up with the money this way, or that's an excuse that you're telling yourself. I trust people's timing. I do.
Yeah.
And if they don't see the value in it yet, it's not my job to force them. And also, they might see the value in it, but they have other things going on in their lives that truly make it not a good time for them to invest. So I'm in it for the long game. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to hold the vision of what's possible and I'm going to keep chugging forward. And when they're ready, they can come back, but I'm not going to pressure anybody in the moment.
I love that. Yeah. I kind of subscribe to the same thing. I was, again, the school of thought that was projected to me was here's how to handle the objections and kind of tell them they can make it work. They'll make it work if they really want it. And like, it just has a little bit of like a dash of shame in there, which I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
feel 100% comfortable with. I've always learned how to handle objections in my sales jobs. I used to work in sales, and it's a little bit different when you're dealing with these types of investments when it comes to transformation, as opposed to a product or as opposed to a service that's very direct. When you're talking about a transformation, they really have to see the vision. And if you did not allow them to see the vision, you can't force them to see it if you can't articulate the value such that they have a clear picture of it. And I think that you nailed it spot on.
Absolutely. And it is different than like a product-based business or something like that, where it's more of a clear transaction of this is exactly what you get. Because when it is a transformation, if they're also not 100% all in, like a hell yes to the transformation, they're probably not going to get the full value of it. And then they're going to leave a little disappointed. And so you want people joining your world when they feel so excited and all in to do this transformation with you.
I love that. So, Emily, I really appreciate this conversation. I think this is so helpful for coaches to hear because there's a lot of messaging out there that goes back and forth on these different types of topics and a lot of kind of, what do you call it? Like sound bites, like charge your worth and hire before you're ready. And like, the one sentence pieces of advice. So I really, I really appreciate a little bit more of that elaborate, like, here's my take on that. And here's how I interpret it. And I love having folks on like you who can articulate that. So I appreciate it. Can you tell our audience a bit more about where they can find more information about what you do and potentially working with you?
Absolutely. Everything I do, my home base is Instagram. So find me at It's Emily Cincotta. It's a long last name. We can drop it in the show notes, I'm sure. But everything I do, you can find there. I always host live programs and courses, and they happen throughout the year, throughout the months. So to stay most up to date, just find me there. Send me a DM, say hi, and I can't wait to meet you.
Absolutely. Make sure you're following Emily and snap this podcast on your phone that you're listening to and post your biggest takeaway from today or a snippet from Emily. I know she had so many, so there's no shortage of them. You have no excuse, guys. You can post one little thing that you learned today. We would really appreciate it. Tag me, tag Emily, and we'll be sure to share it. Emily, thank you so much again for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.